Hey, welcome to On the Clock, a collaboration between the Pack a Day Podcast and the Draft Fellows. I'm Andrew Mertig. That's Kyle Fellows. Together, we are the Draft Fellows, and leading up to the draft, we'll be doing a series that covers picks 1 through 32, each team's biggest needs, and who they should be considering at their pick. You can catch the video of all 32 episodes of the Draft Fellows on the Draft Fellows channel on YouTube, and you can check out the audio versions on the Pack a Day Podcast. So you can go back and check out our first 19 episodes of this series. Today, we are on to pick 20 and the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, Broncos up here. Fascinating conversation. Lots of different directions they could go with things. Running back, wide receiver, linebacker, defensive line. The list goes on and on of places that they could look to add some talent to this team. The Broncos have some of the best depth at wide receiver and running back probably in the NFL. Unfortunately, they just don't have any starters, right? Like that's maybe a little bit unfair to some of those guys there. Cortland Sutton is there at wide receiver, but honestly, like Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Trent Sherfield, these guys are great depth. Like a lot of teams would be really lucky to have them as their like third, fourth, fifth wide receivers, but they need more impact at wide receiver. Same thing at running back. Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin, great depth pieces, good role players, but they need someone to be the bell cow, to be the dynamic difference maker at running back. And so we could see Denver add some playmakers there early in the draft for the offense. They could also add some guys on defense, right? They brought in Trey Greenlaw to play linebacker, but they could certainly use more help there. And in a class with this much defensive line help, like this is a super deep class of defensive line, they could definitely look to add someone to the trenches on defense as well. So lots of different ways that the Denver Broncos could go with it.
Yeah, and we've talked ad nauseum throughout this series about how difficult it's going to be to trade down from somewhere in the teens and even early 20s and recoup the kind of draft assets that you would want to make that trade down. And I don't think Denver's necessarily going to have a big advantage or maybe even a willingness to move down from here. I also don't think that they're necessarily a good trade up candidate. So there's something in the back of my mind that's telling me that we may see on that Thursday night in late April in Green Bay, Wisconsin, a lot of inactivity and teams just sticking and picking because the value just simply isn't there to give up assets to move up or to acquire assets to move down. And so if the Broncos do stay there, they might have their choice of running backs. We don't know where Ashton Genty is going to go. Maybe he is long gone by pick 20, or maybe he's still there. The mock drafts are not helping us in figuring that out at all. But also they may have some good options when it comes to wide receivers, whether that's Tetero McMillan from Arizona, Matthew Golden from Texas, Emeka Ibuka from Ohio State. Maybe if they're thinking center, Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, if you think he can stick at center. Defensive line, we know this is a super talented defensive line class, but players like Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, Derek Harmon from Oregon, Toledo's Darius Alexander, Tyler Williams from Ohio State, they could all be options at pick 20. So who are a couple of players that you think that the Denver Broncos should target here?
Yeah, I think the fit for Alabama linebacker Jihad Campbell is pretty interesting here. But I think we could see Denver go offense here. I laid that out earlier in the show, but there are just some really intriguing fits here, combination of need / value at this point in the draft. And I think that Ashton Jeanty's probably gone by 20, maybe not, but probably is. But I think that this might be the ceiling for someone like Omarion Hampton. You start thinking about where's that second running back going to come off the board. And I think he could be a really nice fit for Sean Payton and allow him to be kind of that central focus of the offense and maybe get 15, 20 carries a game. But there are a couple other fits that I like here. Sean Payton loves those big body slot weapons, and he had a certain featured slot receiver there with the Saints and Michael Thomas, who was from Ohio State. What's to keep Denver from adding their own featured slot also from Ohio State in someone like Emeka Ibuka there at 20? So there are a couple different offensive weapons that I think that the Denver Broncos could add in here at 20. Which way they'll go with it is really interesting.
Yeah, and typically in this series, I try to provide a little bit of counter to what you offered, and maybe talk about defensive linemen. We know there's a lot of really good defensive lineman options here, but I do want to talk a little bit more about offense. And I think they would love to add Matthew Golden as a wide receiver who has a little bit more juice and upside than anybody they currently have.
Mm-hmm.
Probably accentuates the skill set of Cortland Sutton a little bit better than a Tetero McMillan would.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure running back is under consideration. And going back, Sean Payton was entering his first year as a head coach in 2006 when the New Orleans Saints drafted Reggie Bush. They also took Mark Ingram later in his tenure in the first round. So he's gone first round running back twice as a head coach
Yeah.
of the Saints.
Wow.
And so I don't think that he would be super adverse to having that happen in Denver either. So if there's someone that they do really love, I think that could be an option. And we know all about Ashton Genty. You also mentioned Omarion Hampton. But what about Travion Henderson from
Yeah.
Ohio State? He's super electric with the ball in his hands. He's a pretty good pass catcher. I think he's even better than what he showed at Ohio State because he wasn't asked to do it as often, and he could potentially fill that Reggie Bush or maybe even Alvin Kamara role in this Denver offense and be really, really fun option there as well.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. Obviously, there was some controversy to the way that Coach Payton ended up in Denver and whether or not that was a smart move. There's a little bit of controversy in what quarterback they ended up selecting last year to make things work and where they selected that quarterback. And both of those things have seemingly worked out okay. And now it's just how did the Denver Broncos build going forward to put the pieces in place to make this offense go. And I think we've seen Sean Payton have an incredible amount of success. And so I think they'll be able to just kind of lean into that and say, okay, what pieces do we need to add here? Lots of different options will be on the board. What way will they go with it? But I think it's really interesting to see. Will it be first round? Will it be second round? I think we'll see an electric running back added to this team. And I think that'll be fun for NFL fans and for Bronco fans to see that all come together. But thanks for joining us for another round of On the Clock with the Pack a Day podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show and stick with us as we preview all 32 teams in the series leading up to the 2025 NFL Draft. But from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellas have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.